Jack Reynolds straightened his tie for the 14th time in as many minutes, staring at his reflection in the glossy surface of the spacecraft window. Outside, the magnificent curved hull of the Galactic Confederation's diplomatic vessel loomed like a chrome-plated whale, all sleek lines and pulsing blue lights. "You look fine, Mr. Ambassador," said Captain Ningian from her position by the airlock. "Chloe, Weiss, though I still think the tie was overkill. The briefing said these aliens don't even wear clothes." Jack shot her a withering look. "It's called protocol, Captain. Humanity's first official contact with the Galactic Confederation deserves a certain gravitas." "Say to the wall, when you want to the path." "Gravitas won't matter much if they communicate by smell or interpretive dance," Ningian muttered, but Jack pretended not to hear her. The truth was, Jack Reynolds hadn't been anyone's first choice for this job. He'd been a mid-level State Department bureaucrat with a talent for smoothing over minor trade disputes when the aliens had shown up and demanded a human representative. The actual diplomats had all been at some conference in Geneva, and Jack had simply been the highest-ranking official within 50 miles of the landing site. 3 days later, he was humanity's ambassador to the stars, armed with nothing but a hastily memorized briefing packet and a tie that cost more than his monthly rent. "Docking procedure complete," announced the ship's AI in its irritatingly calm voice. "Atmospheric compatibility confirmed. Airlock opening in 10-9. Jack swallowed hard. Right, history in the making, great pressure. The airlock hissed open to reveal what appeared to be a walking collection of blue tentacles wearing something that might charitably be called a hat. The alien was roughly human-sized, though it seemed to have no fixed shape, its appendages constantly shifting and rearranging like a lava lamp having an existential crisis. "Greetings, Earth representative." The alien's voice sounded like a saxophone being played underwater. "I am Senior Diplomatic Liaison Krex'Tor of the Galactic Confederation. We welcome you to interstellar society, approximately 47,000 years after most developing species typically qualify." Jack blinked. Thank you, I'm Ambassador Jack Reynolds of Earth. We're sorry for the delay." Krex'Tor's body rippled in what Jack hoped was amusement. "No matter. You've arrived now, albeit with primitive technology and concerning levels of internal conflict. But your species shows promise in the areas of music, dairy-based desserts, and creating small electronic devices that require replacement every solar cycle." "That's very specific feedback," Jack said, forcing a smile. "On behalf of Earth, I look forward to establishing diplomatic relations and learning from your advanced civilization." "Excellent." Krex'Tor extended what Jack assumed was an appendage meant for greeting. "Shall we formalize our introduction with the traditional greeting of temporary physical contact?" Jack nodded eagerly, reaching out to shake what he hoped was Krex'Tor's hand equivalent. As their limbs met, Jack felt something sharp graze his palm. Ouch. Jack pulled back, noticing a small cut on his hand. A drop of blood welled up from the minor wound. "Sorry about that. Must have caught it on something." He looked up to apologize further but froze at the sight before him. Where the drop of his blood had touched Krex'Tor, the alien's blue flesh was bubbling and smoking like bacon on a hot griddle. "Hey!" screeched Krex'Tor, tentacles flailing wildly. "Biological weapon. The human has deployed a biological weapon." "What?" "No, it's just a paper cut," Jack protested, even as alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed as Krex'Tor writhed dramatically on the floor, the small spot where Jack's blood had landed continuing to sizzle like a miniature volcanic eruption. Captain Ningian sidled up beside Jack, watching the alien's theatrical suffering with a raised eyebrow. "So much for gravitas, Mr. Ambassador." Jack sighed as armed security aliens rushed toward them, pointing weapons that looked suspiciously like bedazzled hair dryers. "I knew I should have gone with the clip-on tie. For the last time, we did not attempt to assassinate your diplomat with weaponized hemoglobin," Jack shouted, though his protests were somewhat undermined by the fact that he was speaking from inside what appeared to be an alien fish tank. The quarantine chamber's transparent walls gave him an excellent view of the Confederation's medical bay sweeping, pristine room filled with technology that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd misunderstood the phrase modern art. On the other side of the glass, Captain Mingian was having a heated discussion with a creature that resembled a 6-foot praying mantis wearing a lab coat. The alien's name tag read Dr. Plex in 7 different alphabets, none of them human. Your primitive diplomatic techniques have caused third-degree cellular disruption to senior liaison Krex'Tor. Dr. Plex clicked, mandibles snapping in what Jack assumed was the alien equivalent of indignation. The Council is considering reclassifying Earth from harmlessly backward to deliberately hostile. It was an accident, Nguyen insisted. Look, we've brought our own medical expert to help sort this out. She gestured to a dark-haired woman who was already examining the moaning blue blob that was Krex'Tor on a nearby examination table. Doctor. Ellie Martinez had been Earth's foremost xenobiologist for approximately 12 hours ever since the aliens had landed, and someone remembered she'd written her doctoral thesis on theoretical alien physiology. This is fascinating, Ellie murmured, peering at the burn on Krex'Tor's tentacle through a microscope that looked like it might double as a cappuccino machine. The cellular breakdown is similar to what we'd see with a mild acid burn, but there's nothing acidic about human blood. If anything, we're slightly alkaline. Alkaline? Dr. Plex's antennae shot straight up like exclamation points. Human internal fluid has a pH above 7? Well, yeah, Ellie shrugged. Blood pH usually sits around 7.4. Basic stuff. First year med school. The medical bay fell silent. Even Krex'Tor stopped moaning dramatically to stare at Ellie. Your species circulates alkaline solution through your vascular system. Fidja. Dr. Plex's voice had dropped to a horrified whisper. As in, continuously. Inside your bodies, all the time. Jack pressed against the glass. Is that normal? Normal? Dr. Plex's whole body shuddered. Every sentient species in the Galactic Confederation has acidic blood, ranging from pH 2.3 to 6.9. It's a fundamental evolutionary convergence across carbon-based life. Oh, said Jack, suddenly understanding. So my slightly alkaline blood is basically like pouring drain cleaner on you guys? A crude but accurate analogy, Dr. Plex confirmed, backing away slightly from the quarantine chamber. Your basic bodily fluids are corrosive to every known sentient species in the galaxy. Ellie's eyes widened with scientific glee. That's amazing. The implications for xenobiology are groundbreaking. The evolutionary divergence must have occurred billions of years ago, perhaps due to different atmospheric. Yes, very interesting, interrupted Dr. Plex, still maintaining a safe distance from the humans. But the more pressing concern is that we have inadvertently allowed walking chemical weapons onto our diplomatic vessel. Right from his examination table, Krex'Tor raised a trembling tentacle. Call the Security Council, he groaned. The code read biosecurity threat. Possibly upgrade to code purple if they bleed on purpose. We don't bleed on purpose, Jack protested. Captain Dean coughed discreetly. Well, technically sometimes we do. Donating blood. Medical testing, religious ceremonies in some cultures. Not helping, Captain, Jack hissed. The humans deliberately harvest their corrosive internal fluids. Shrieked Dr. Plex, antennae vibrating in distress. Security. Maximum containment protocols immediately. As alarms blared and more aliens in what looked like hazmat suits rushed into the medical bay, Jack slumped against the wall of his quarantine tank. So much for intergalactic goodwill, he muttered. The first day on the job, and I've turned humanity into the galaxy's most feared biological threat by getting a paper cut. Day 3 of being treated like a walking bottle of Drano, Jack announced to no one in particular, marking another tally on the wall of their upgraded containment suite with his finger. The Galactic Confederation had moved the humans from the medical quarantine tanks to what they called diplomatic isolation quarters, which was just bureaucratic speak for slightly nicer prison. The room was spacious enough, with 3 separate sleeping pods and a common area featuring furniture clearly designed for beings with very different anatomical requirements. Everything was sealed behind multiple layers of containment fields that gave the air a faint purple shimmer. Ellie didn't even look up from her datapad. At least they gave us access to their scientific database. Do you know they have 17 different biological kingdoms? And something called a quantum fungus that exists in 12 dimensions simultaneously? Fascinating, Jack replied, not even trying to hide his sarcasm. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council is voting on whether to classify humanity as a prohibited species or just quarantine Earth for the next millennium. Captain Ningian looked up from her corner where she'd been methodically doing push-ups. You're the diplomat, Reynolds. Diplomate us out of this. Working on it, Jack muttered, just as the door whooshed open. An alien that looked like the offspring of a jellyfish and a vacuum cleaner floated in, trailing translucent tendrils that operated a hovering tool cart. Its body pulsed with soft blue light as it moved to a panel on the wall. Greetings, dangerous alkaline beings, the creature burbled cheerfully. Maintenance technician Zorp reporting for atmospheric regulator adjustments. Please refrain from deploying your caustic bodily fluids in my direction. Jack perked up. This was the first alien besides Dr. Plex who'd actually spoken to them in days. Hello, Zorp. Nice to meet you. How are things out there? Zorp's body rippled in what might have been a shrug. The council still arguing. Very boring. Half want to send you home with warning buoys around your solar system. Half want to study you. Small faction suggesting controlled detonation of your planet, but they suggest that for most issues. That's concerning, Jack said, moving closer but careful to maintain what the aliens had established as safe bleeding distance. Zorp worked quietly for a moment, then added, Council afraid, the first new thing in centuries. Most species very similar, you very different. Ellie joined the conversation. Different isn't necessarily bad. Our physiology could have scientific applications, or defensive ones, added Nguyen thoughtfully. Jack's diplomatic brain suddenly kicked into high gear. Zorp, who's the biggest threat to the Confederation right now? Evraxian Dominion. Zorp answered promptly. Always pushing borders, taking systems, very rude at parties. Jack smiled for the first time in days, and I'm guessing their blood is acidic like everyone else's. Standard pH 3.2, confirmed Zorp, adjusting something in the wall panel. Why asking? Because, Jack said, leaning against the wall with newfound confidence, I think we've been approaching this all wrong. We're not a threat, we're an asset. A unique defensive capability no one else has. Ellie caught on immediately. A natural deterrent. Any species trying to attack humans would risk exposure to our blood. Exactly, Jack nodded. Not a weapon, a shield. The Confederation gains an ally with built-in defensive capabilities against their worst enemies. Zorp's bioluminescence flickered rapidly. Interesting perspective shift. Very diplomatic. Zorp can introduce to Council Representative G. Zilk. Owes Zorp favor for fixing personal relaxation tub. You'd do that for us? Jack asked. Zorp's body pulsed in what seemed like amusement. Zorp curious. Also, Zorp tired of double shifts because everyone afraid to clean human quarters. 2 hours and one clandestine meeting later, Jack stood before a hastily assembled subcommittee of the Galactic Council via holographic projection. He'd made his pitch with all the diplomatic finesse he could muster, emphasizing cooperation, mutual defense, and the peaceful applications of humanity's unique biology. A demonstration, demanded Councillor Vrex, a being that resembled a sentient crystal formation. We require proof of these defensive capabilities. Jack nodded solemnly, trying not to look too pleased. Of course, Councillor. We'd be happy to arrange a controlled demonstration of human defensive potential. As the transmission ended, Nguyen gave him a skeptical look. A demonstration? How exactly do you plan to demonstrate the defensive uses of our blood without, bleeding on someone? Jack straightened his perpetually crooked tie. No idea. But it buys us time, and that's what diplomacy is all about. Ellie grinned. Besides, between the three of us, we should be able to come up with something suitably dramatic. What's the worst that could happen? Never ask that question, groaned Jack, especially not in space. This is, without question, The dumbest plan in the history of interspecies diplomacy, Captain Nguyen declared as she helped Jack into what looked like a spacesuit designed by a committee of particularly anxious bubble wrap enthusiasts. "It's not that bad," Jack protested, his voice muffled by the helmet. "We just need to show them that human blood has defensive applications without actually bleeding on anyone important." The demonstration chamber was a vast arena like space aboard the Confederation's flagship. Tiered seating surrounded a central platform where Jack now stood, encased in his containment suit with strategic deployment ports that could be opened to release carefully controlled amounts of human blood. Ellie had assured him it was completely safe, which did nothing to calm his nerves. "Remember," Ellie whispered through his comms, "we're only using drops. The synthetic alien tissue samples will show the effect without any actual aliens getting hurt. Unless your suit malfunctions and turns you into a walking blood sprinkler," Nguyen added helpfully. Before Jack could respond, the chamber doors slid open to admit the Galactic Council Observation Committee. Leading them was a towering figure that resembled a cross between a rhinoceros and an octopus, clad in ornate armor that clinked with every heavy step. "That's Fleet Commander Krex'Tor," Zorp whispered from his maintenance position near the human staging area. "Very important. Very skeptical. Thinks humans are trouble." "Wonderful," Jack muttered, then switched to his diplomatic voice. "Esteemed council members, thank you for the opportunity to demonstrate the defensive capabilities of human physiology." Krex'Tor snorted, a sound like a garbage disposal choking on silverware. "Let's be clear, human. I've reviewed your proposal, and I remain unconvinced. Your alkaline blood is a biological anomaly, not a strategic asset." "I understand your skepticism, Commander," Jack replied smoothly. "That's why we've prepared this controlled demonstration." He nodded to Ellie, who activated the first test. A robotic arm placed a sample of synthetic alien tissue on a platform, and a small mechanical device prepared to deposit a single drop of Jack's blood onto it. "As you can see," Jack began, "the controlled application of human blood can create a localized defensive barrier that—" The blood drop fell, but instead of the expected small reaction, the synthetic tissue began to bubble violently, emitting an alarming hissing sound. "And that's a bit more reactive than our tests indicated," Ellie said nervously. The bubbling intensified, and suddenly the sample shot across the room like a rocket-powered hockey puck, narrowly missing Councillor Vrex before splattering against the wall. "Is this your idea of controlled, Ambassador?" Krex'Tor thundered. "Just a minor calibration issue," Jack said quickly. "Let's try the next demonstration." See? The second test was supposed to show how diluted human blood could be used to create a protective perimeter. Instead, it produced a rapidly expanding foam that quickly engulfed Jack's containment suit up to his knees. "Fascinating, unexpected reaction," Ellie commented through the comms. "The synthetic tissue seems to be—" "Not now, Doctor," Jack hissed as he struggled to free himself from the foam. Krex'Tor made a noise that might have been alien laughter. "This is pathetic. The Council has wasted enough time on these." The commander's words were cut off by a deafening alarm. The chamber's lights shifted to a pulsing red, and a voice blared over the intercom in multiple languages. "Security breach. Hostile boarding detected, and multiple intruders. Vraxian raiders," shouted one of the council members as the chamber doors blasted open. A squad of heavily armed figures swarmed in, their armor adorned with spikes and grisly trophies. Their leader, a particularly nasty-looking creature with too many eyes and teeth, pointed a weapon at the council members. Nobody move. The Vraxian Dominion now claims this vessel and all its occupants. In the chaos, Jack's containment suit was struck by a stray blast, rupturing one of the deployment ports and sending a thin spray of human blood arcing through the air. It landed directly on 3 of the Vraxian raiders, who immediately began screaming and clutching at their dissolving armor. "What is this?" shrieked the Vraxian leader. "What kind of weapon is this?" Jack, still half trapped in foam and leaking blood from his damaged suit, looked at Krex'Tor with a raised eyebrow. I believe this would qualify as a practical demonstration of human defensive capabilities, Commander. For the first time, Vrokdar's alien features twisted into what might have been a smile. Indeed it would, Ambassador. Indeed it would. Chaos reigned in the demonstration chamber. Council members scattered for cover as the Vraxian raiders regrouped, their leader barking orders while casting wary glances at Jack's leaking containment suit. The three raiders hit by the blood spray were still writhing on the floor, their exoskeletons sizzling unpleasantly. Secure the council members. The Vraxian commander shouted. They're our bargaining chips. Jack, still trapped in rapidly hardening foam up to his knees, looked desperately around the room. Captain Nguyen had taken cover behind a console and was clearly calculating her odds against a dozen armed raiders. Ellie was frantically working on a tablet, probably trying to remotely repair Jack's suit, and Vrokdar was staring directly at Jack with a look that somehow clearly conveyed well. You wanted to prove yourself useful, human. Time for some extreme diplomacy. Hey, discount space pirates, Jack shouted, drawing the Vraxian's attention. Yeah, I'm talking to you, the walking seafood platters with the overcompensating guns. The Vraxian leader swiveled toward Jack, multiple eyes narrowing. You dare insult the elite forces of the Vraxian Dominion? You, a squishy pink creature stuck in foam. That's Ambassador Squishy Pink Creature to you, Jack retorted, surreptitiously working at the fastening of his right glove. And I'm not stuck. I'm tactically positioned. Secure that 1-2, the leader ordered, gesturing to two raiders, careful of the leaking fluid. It appears corrosive. More than you know, Jack muttered, finally freeing his hand from the glove. With a quick, decisive motion that would have made his high school football coach proud, Jack slammed his palm against a jagged edge of his broken suit port, wincing as it sliced his skin. Jack, what are you? Ellie's alarmed voice came through his comms, then cut off as she realized his plan. The approaching raiders hesitated, seeing blood well up from Jack's palm. Their hesitation turned to alarm when Jack grinned and held up his bleeding hand like a weapon. Here's a diplomatic proposal for you, Jack announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Leave now, or get a very personal demonstration of why humans just became the Confederation's most valuable allies. The lead raider laughed, a harsh clicking sound. One bleeding human against 12 Vraxian elite warriors? Your species must reproduce through stupidity. You can't. Fair point, Jack conceded. But you're forgetting something important. What's that? Yeah, I'm not the only human here. On cue, Captain Nguyen vaulted over the console she'd been hiding behind, a small cut visible on her forearm. She landed directly between two raiders, who recoiled instinctively from the human blood droplets flying from her wound. Across the room, Ellie had somehow acquired what looked like a medical injector filled with red fluid. Fun fact about humans, she called out cheerfully. We can donate over 470 milliliters of blood without adverse effects. That's roughly. She calculated quickly, enough to incapacitate every Vraxian in this room about 3 times over. The council members, who had been cowering in fear moments before, watched in astonishment as the tables turned. The Vraxian raiders began backing away from the humans, weapons still raised but confidence clearly shaken. This is an outrage. The Vraxian leader sputtered. Using biological weapons is prohibited by Galactic Convention. Actually, Vrokdar rumbled, stepping forward for the first time. The humans aren't using weapons at all. They're simply existing in your presence, aggressively. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if Councillor Vrex hadn't chosen that moment to emerge from hiding with surprising speed for a crystalline being. Before anyone could react, the Councillor had positioned herself beside Jack and extended a sharp crystal appendage. Allow me, Ambassador, Rex said, and flicked Jack's bleeding hand, sending droplets of blood flying directly at the Vraxian leader. The resulting screams of pain and hasty retreat of the remaining raiders was, as Jack would later report, a diplomatic breakthrough achieved through unconventional means. Within an hour, the ship's security had rounded up the remaining raiders, carefully handling them with specialized equipment designed for containing hazardous materials, or in this case, containing beings vulnerable to hazardous humans. In the council chamber afterward, Jack stood before the assembled representatives, his hand bandaged and a fresh containment suit replacing his damaged one. "I believe," said Councillor Vrex, "that we have witnessed a most convincing demonstration of human, defensive capabilities." "Most impressive," agreed another councillor. "A gaseous entity floating in a transparent sphere. The potential applications are numerous." Krex'Tor, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "I move to immediately upgrade Earth's status from quarantine pending to strategic military ally. The deterrent value alone is worth the risk of their unusual biology." As murmurs of agreement spread through the council chamber, Jack caught Ellie's eye. She gave him a thumbs up while Captain Nguyen simply nodded in respectful acknowledgement. Sometimes, Jack reflected, the best diplomacy happened when you were backed into a corner, or in his case, stuck in rapidly hardening alien foam with a leaky suit. To the newest members of the Galactic Confederation. Krex'Tor raised what appeared to be a drinking apparatus, though Jack couldn't tell if it was going into the alien's body or coming out of it. "May our alliance be long, prosperous and carefully contained within appropriate safety protocols." The grand reception hall of Earth's newly established Confederation embassy sparkled with the assembled dignitaries of 17 species, all keeping a respectful 3-meter distance from the human attendees. 6 weeks had passed since the Vraxian diplomatic incident, as it was now officially recorded in Confederation archives. Jack Reynolds had gone from accidental ambassador to celebrated diplomat, with a commendation that literally translated as effectively weaponized personal injury for peace. "Thank you, Senior Liaison Krex'Tor," Jack replied, raising his own glass. "And might I say how pleased I am to see you've made a full recovery." Krex'Tor's tentacles rippled cheerfully. The dermal grafts were completely successful. "And my new protective coating allows me to be in the same room as humans without emergency medical teams on standby." Indeed. Most of the aliens present were wearing various forms of protective gear, everything from thin translucent films covering their appendages to full hazmat-style suits for the more cautious species. Fashion designers across the Confederation had apparently been working overtime to create human-safe attire that wouldn't look out of place at diplomatic functions. Across the room, Dr. Ellie Martinez was deep in conversation with Dr. Plex and several other alien scientists, all wearing clear protective face shields that fogged up whenever they got too excited about whatever xenobiological topic they were discussing. And the integration of diluted human blood into the flagship's defensive systems has already proven effective in 2 border skirmishes. Captain Nguyen was explaining to Commander Krex'Tor nearby. The Vraxians pulled back as soon as they realized what they were dealing with. "Most impressive," Krex'Tor rumbled. "Though I still find it hard to believe your species evolved with such an unusual biochemistry." "Just lucky, I guess." Nguyen shrugged, though our luck is apparently on backorder. "Did you see the new transport containers they're using for human passengers?" She gestured to a holographic display, showing the latest in interspecies transportation sleek passenger vessels, emblazoned with warning symbols, and the phrase "caution." It contains humans in 27 languages. Jack was distracted from his eavesdropping by the approach of Councillor Vrex, whose crystalline form caught the light in dazzling patterns. Ambassador Reynolds, the councillor, greeted him. "I wanted to personally thank you for Earth's contribution to our new defense initiative. The prototype human hemoglobin barrier has already been deployed to 3 vulnerable outposts." "Happy to help," Jack replied, though I still think Blood Shield was a catchier name. "Marketing felt it was too direct," Vrex said, her crystal facets shifting in what Jack had learned was amusement. "The Confederation prefers its weapons to sound scientific rather than biological." "Fair enough," Jack conceded. "As long as it keeps the peace." "Indeed." Vrex's voice became more serious. "You know, in all my centuries of council service, I never anticipated that our greatest new ally would be a species whose mere existence presents a biological hazard to the rest of the galaxy." Jack smiled. "If there's one thing humans excel at, Counselor, it's finding unexpected uses for our natural talents." Speaking of which, Vrex continued, I've been meaning to ask about another human biological peculiarity. I understand your species produces a defensive enzyme in your ocular secretions? Something called tears. Jack nearly choked on his drink. That's not exactly how I'd describe crying, but technically yes. Fascinating, Vrex murmured. I wonder if there might be applications. One bodily fluid at a time. Counselor, Jack interrupted hastily. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. As the party continued around them, Zorp floated up beside Jack, now wearing an official Confederation uniform with cultural liaison insignia. Humans doing well, Zorp observed. Very popular now, everyone wanting human protection. Ironic, yes? First feared for bleeding, now valued for same. That's humanity for you, Jack replied with a wry smile. Throughout our history, our greatest diplomatic breakthroughs have usually involved bleeding on things. Usually it was our own battlefields, but hey, the galaxy works in mysterious ways. Zorp's body pulsed with blue light. Zorp thinking, perhaps universe has sense of humor after all. Jack looked around at the room full of aliens wearing human-proof protective gear, while simultaneously celebrating humanity's inclusion in galactic society, all because his paper cut had accidentally dissolved an alien's tentacle. You know what, Zorp? I think you might be right.